Okay, everything's on. So I'll open this first keynote speech, which is going to be about, creating the city with a lot of other things involved. And it's from Fiorenza Gamba, who I'm now presenting. She is a sociologist and anthropologist, and graduated in history of philosophy in Turin, and then held a PhD in philosophy in the Sorbonne University in Paris, and another one in sociology and culture and communication from the University of Turin, and an HDR in sociology and anthropology from the University of Strasbourg. She is currently associate researcher at the IRS of the University of Geneva and associate professor at DISEA of the University of Sassari. And she is also the co-founder of the AIS section of Sociology of the Imaginary and the ASLF CR38 Socioanthropologie Politique, the French-speaking researcher association. A strong interdisciplinary character marks out her research, which is located at the crossroads between sociology, anthropology, and communication. She studies the transformation of rituals of death and commemoration and the way of coping with loss through the digital rituals, as well as the contemporary demand for immortality. And I think this is what makes it makes a bridge between the various aspects of her research, this focus on rituals, because another field of interest is the social effects of digital technologies, especially linked to mobility condition and their quality in the making of urban identity, inclusion, and urban rituals. This is, in fact, the subject of a recent project, UNIC Unexpected Inclusions, Migration, Mobility, and the Open City, founded by the Swiss National Sciences Foundation in partnership with the Belgian National Fund for Scientific Research. And so this is the main reason why she is been asked to be here with us and to deliver this interesting keynote speech about creating the city, differences, inclusion, belonging. I'll be chair, as you can see, as well as discussant. So in my first, with my first hat, I'll give Fiorenza the floor and ask her to share with us her interesting items of research. Welcome, Fiorenza. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabio, for the introduction and also the invitation. I'm glad to participate in this conference and to have the honor of opening the conference. I'm really sorry for my voice due to the strong tracheitis and consequence loss of voice in the last few days. I'm not still good. And above all, I don't know how long my voice will last. My daughter said to me, don't speak, but it's a bit difficult, don't speak. So I try to be optimistic. Fabio introduced me very well, but I would just like to add a few elements to explain my participation in this conference. In other words, why I'm going to talk you about inclusion, difference, and belonging at a conference about multidimensional risk, megacities, security, and uncertainty. About the city, of course, I work on cities. My research is about cities, but I work on cities that are very different from each other. Montreal, Dakar, Brussels, Liège, Charleroi, Geneva, Zurich, Turin, and Chiasso. So is Montreal a megacity? No, it's a metropolis, of course, but not a megacity. Is Dakar a megacity? Neither. Is Dakar is very interesting. Is very interesting the conurbation of Dakar, the little town. I think, for example, to Pekin, that's belonging to the conurbation of Dakar, but it's not a megacity. Brussels, Geneva, and Zurich are normal city, not so big, very important. Yes, Geneva is a very special city, but not a megacity. And so on, Turin, Liège, Charleroi are cities. And finally, Chiasso. How many of you know Chiasso? Only a few, I think. Chiasso, a town in an Italian part of Switzerland with 7,500 inhabitants, the last town before the Italian border, close to city of Como. None of these cities is a megacities, but all of them can be defined as ordinary city, interesting cities to study, regardless of the categories to which they may belong and the models they may represent. Big cities, small cities, Western cities, and no Western cities. Let us take Chiasso, for example, a small, almost European border town of 7,500 inhabitants, which until the 80s was an important center for the circulation of goods, legal and illegal, of money, especially illegal, with a large number of cross-border commuters, and whose resident population is currently made up of people of more than 50 different nationalities. Given that studies on the city, the big city, the mega city, is vital to broader advanced in the social sciences, neglect the smaller urban centers has profound consequences for urban studies. It is not only the global cities or the third world cities that should be central to academic analysis and policy recommendation, but also the ordinary city in all their complexity, diversity, and peculiarity. It is the interest in differences in variety that has led me and my research group to focus on ordinary cities. Sorry. Large or small. And it is some of this city that I will talk about today. So, and about risk, I will not address the issue of risk from the perspective of possible management and control policies, nor an object of sustainability studies, and nor from the perspective of risk communication, both in terms of prevention and emergency management dimensions. In other words, I will not discuss risk in the areas in which it is most commonly associated: environment, health, economy, crime. I'm talking about the risk of exclusion and discrimination in the city, which often generate marginalization, stigmatization, and conflict. One of the themes currently most present, not only in the academic debate on the urban, but above all in the planning and governance activities of public decision makers, is the city of the future, mega, global, or ordinary city. With reference to the Sustainable Development Goals of European Agenda 2030, the urban planning for the future must imagine and implement a future for the cities in the short term, 2030, 2050 at the most. which take into account some major challenges: the ecological transition, which has become an urgent necessity, the mobility, which includes migrant flows, and finally, the inclusion of differences, which manifest all their potential in the cities. The current context, which is increasingly marked by uncertainty, as the pandemic has violently shown, has long been a field of observation for scholars, such as Zygmunt Bauman, who has highlighted its contradiction. One of the most relevant aspects on this condition is that uncertainty, that fragility that affects human beings and think, cannot be effectively addressed by the urban planning if it is not included in a common narrative, in a common imaginary, capable of producing a sense of belonging, able to include differences in a cities that become a common good. This requires that users of the cities, its inhabitants, the people who work there and who pass through, identify themselves with this common good, take care of it and love it. This identification is based on the feeling that this common good belongs to everyone and that it is a territory of common belonging. In French, there is a very nice and very effective expression, à l'aise. Être à l'aise, se sentir à l'aise, which can be translated as, but I'm not really sure, to feel at ease, to feel good, but also to feel free, not constrained, not stressed, and at the same time welcomed in a place, in a situation, even if it is completely new or an unknown. This expression, à l'aise, which I love very much, expresses well the concept of inclusion, that is, to be welcomed and appreciated with our differences and for our differences. This sense of belonging does not develop automatically, of course. The city can exist without doubt in the vision that each person has of it. However, this vision is only justified insofar as the city responds to it with its openness. It offers opportunities for inclusion, such as work, security, social support. The practice of urban life can transform the user into a person who appreciates what the city offers. However, in order to generate a sense of belonging, of a commitment to the city, it is not enough to be a user. There must be symbolic offers of belonging, a narrative which allows each person to identify themselves with the place. In other words, to find their own place in the city. Studying the theme of inclusion and in a complementary way the theme of the open city is an urgent task that cannot be carried out by a single discipline. It is an interdisciplinary work that can only be successful with the synergy work of several discipline. An objective that is also formulated by the theme of Biennale di Venezia. How will we live together? And on page of the website of Biennale, we can read, we need a new spatial contract in the context of widening political divides and growing economic inequalities. We call all architects, of course, for the Biennale, to imagine spaces in which we can generally live together. From my research perspective, a possible form A new form of spatial contract are urban ritual of territorial inclusion. This is the issues of the research done with my colleagues Sandro Catacin and Bob White on the city of Montreal, Geneva, and Turin, but also the topics of the unique project, Unexpected Inclusion, Migration, Mobility, and Open City, a lead agency project of University of Geneva and University of Liège on 7 European cities, ordinary cities, Brussels, Charleroi, Liège, Geneva, Zurich, Chiasso, and Turin. Our hypothesis is as follows. In order to create civic engagement, commitment, and an attitude of care towards the city, we need to love it and feel ourselves to be part of the territory that it is. We need rituals of territorial inclusion. Not only they are effective, but it also is of fundamental importance to offer them continuously in order to respond to the city, which is continuously changing through its demographic dynamics. It is an offer, in other words, which must be renewed in such a way to reassure those who already live there in the city, but also those who arrive in the city, the new arrivant. What is, in this sense, the purpose of this ritual? How do they present themselves in our city? What are the major strengths and weaknesses of existing rituals? What would be an ideal policy for the territorial inclusion of the city? These are the questions which we have addressed with regard to a practice which is known in the city, namely rituals, festival, and so on, but which is little studied in general and even less in its crucial importance for the reproduction of the urban goods. To analyze deeply the framework of the ritual of territorial inclusion, we have to consider that the cities of difference have a double discourse about their own representation. On the one hand, and particularly following the work of Richard Florida, the diversity of lifestyle is seen as engine of economic growth. On the other hand, and when it comes to migration, diversity is seen as a problem that must be addressed through policies called migrant integration. What are the challenges and the context of this double representation? First of all, the liquid society and the end of the strong institution. This is the subject of Zygmunt Bauman. The end of the nation state and the unity of analysis, and the era of mobility and the end of the analysis of a sedentary as normality. The new normality, not so new, normality is the mobility. And there is also a political question of a coexistence of populism, nationalism, closure of the city, and the pluralist society. So human mobility challenges the way we think about living together. Everyday practice based on values and tradition need to be reviewed and designed to allow to the inclusion of newcomers and the established population. Otherwise, exchange, cooperation, and interaction are impossible, and oppression, marginalization, resentment, and exclusion are the inevitable consequence. The imposition of assimilation regimes is form of oppression, while the construction of close communities by newcomers leads to ghettos and poverty. The third way between oppression and ghettoization, the focus of our research, is respectful inclusionary practice aimed at contributing to exchange, cooperation, and interaction between established and newcomers. The consequences on the analysis of human mobility in the urban context are so enough clear. Informalization of living environments, that mean fragile groups and fragile institutions. Breakdown of homogenization logics and the management of the society of differences and creativity, mainstreaming diversity, and super diverse cities, and multiple logics of belonging and citizenship, multiple citizenship and diversified belonging. So, based on this framework, what are the characteristics of urban ritual of territorial inclusion? What emerged from our fieldwork? First of all, it's worth quickly specifying what the elements of ritual are in a very general manner. I don't want to make a lesson of anthropology, but it's only for be clear. A ritual has a beginning and an end. Has a form, performance, and the body is involved. Performance, of course, including the body, and a special condition, the Turner are defined liminoid, the liminoid realm and phenomenon. That is, that events, festival, feast, and so on, that interrupt the daily order, but also the established order, may be collective or individual created, often belong to the sphere of leisure, then tend to develop along the margins and interstices in empty spaces, empty of signification, and often are experimental. The ritual mobilized the social representation of personal, collective, and social memory and identities. Normally, there are in the ritual one or more officers and obviously some ritual object. Moreover, ritual need creativity. This kind of ritual are the result of creativity or invention. They go beyond the dichotomy we-other and emphasizes differences. Their condition is openness. Ritual links individual to the place and the individuals to each other. In this sense, then, the ritual, because of the combination of this element, play the role of scheme that links individual to place and, as a reflection, individuals to each other through the place. Rituals are also flexible link. This urban ritual centered on a place produce flexible ties which are constituted only by adhesion, personal adhesion, and can be transversal to political identity of religious affiliation. The 8 cases of urban rituals which we study in the research, Créer la ville, creating the city, were chosen according to an approach with aim to multiply the form which urban rituals can take, combining the diversity of the promoting actors and the links with tradition. The 8 cases show different combination of these aspects and are also based on different logics in terms of form. These are the following types. I don't know, Fabio, if if I can share my screen, I would like,
I think
shall
you
we
should. Let me check.
some picture of the ritual, so it's maybe more clear.
You can try. You have the button condividi schermo in the
Yeah.
yeah. Try and click it.
So à chaque fois c'est difficile. Ah, voilà.
Tu devrais, tu devrais voir exactement.
Oui, oui, je suis là. Hein,
ça va. Well.
Alors, partager l'écran. I don't know if you
Yes.
can see. Okay. So no. Sorry. Maybe it's better. So the first ritual this kind of ritual, typology of ritual is institutionalized spontaneous ritual. In this case is a student bath in the fountains in Piazza Castello in Turin, the last day of school. It's a very spontaneous ritual, and adolescents are very happy to for the end of the school. And every year the rituals is repeated. The second typology of ritual analyzed is a spontaneous ritual without institutionalization. Is the tam-tams at Mont Royal, Montreal. Is a weekly jam session in summer, of course. Artistic and bohemian atmosphere, and is a ritual of passages of artistic competencies. The third typology is a ritual, I can say a top-down ritual, a ritual organized and founded by the institution of the city of Geneva, with an association with other cultural association, and is a ritual, is a kind of theater that in the street of the Geneva. Another kind of ritual is tradition. Another typology is traditional ritual based on a reminder history. This is the escalade, the most important ritual in Geneva, and as the history of the independence of Geneva and the fight between Catholic, French Catholic and Swiss Protestant. Another typology, the traditional events without a really historical reference, the Festa San Giovanni, the Saint Patron of the city of Turin, is a series of events, parade, fireworks, nightlight show, and so on. The next a ritual invented on the basis of transformation of traditional landmarks. The ritual is, vous faites partie de l'histoire, you are part of history in Montreal, sharing personal imagination and immigration history, and the adolescent organize an exhibition that you can see in in the picture. Another typology is a ritual invented by authorities to make community and without a traditional basis. I don't have a picture, but only a presentation. It's about Gala de Nouveau-Né, Gala of newborn is the reason for we can't have the picture of newborn, of course. And it's a ritual that take place in a special neighborhood in Montreal. And last typology of a ritual analyzed is traditional rituals with a secondary historical reference. Fête de Genève are a series of events and as you can see with a great spectacle of fireworks. So thank j'arrête.
Click the button once again.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So then we identified the more significant elements of inclusion in this ritual. First of all, social inclusiveness. The inclusion of all should be explicitly at the center of the narrative of ritual. We can see different levels of solidarity can be distinguished in this respect, from the family to category of people, for example, the people of the same regions or make the same sport, to human communities, very, very large level. Another significant element of a ritual is territorial inclusiveness, the intention to make the ritual accessible to all, thus offering people the possibility to refer to common place of belonging and allowing newcomers to enter it. This implies an open narrative that can be drawn for tradition, but which must be able to mutate it all the time. Participation, a participatory effort in the organization on the ritual with a strong presence of organization from civil society. We can imagine the organization and realization of rituals starting from a single actor or a group to a participation at all levels, from organization to realization, of all expression of civil society and the economic sector and the political sphere. In this case, where public authorities or institutions are involved, it is important that this is done on a collaborative basis and not in a top-down logic. Legitimization, a benevolent presence of public institutions, and this legitimization can consist of a tolerance of the ritual up to an involvement of state institutions, both organizationally and materially. Emotion, a high degree of emotion inclusion. This emotion charge during the rituals allow participants to free themselves from constraints, to let go, and thus facilitate attitudinal change. And finally, cyclicity. Finally, the renewal of the ritual allow long-term work, the cyclicity of ritual. For example, we can imagine ritual that can place only once, in a week, or only once in the year. Then, as the next step in the research, we formulated recommendation for the dissemination and support of urban ritual of territorial inclusion. But above all, we used this scheme in other analysis, for example, in the UNIC project. And it is exactly one of the cases of this project that I would like to present to you now, to leave the analytical part and enter the more empirical one. And I take the case of the Iftar Street Mill in the San Salvario neighborhood in Turin. I try to share, if I find. Oof, sorry, I'm not well organized for this presentation.
Ça ne va pas?
J'ai un retour pro. Je viens de l'utiliser, donc c'est.
Oui, exactement. C'est ce que je me disais.
Bizarre que ça va être disparu et.
Tu peux essayer de l'ouvrir avant et ensuite tu la trouves lorsque tu pushes le bouton au milieu de l'écran.
Donc, mais c'est ouvert le. Donc, je ne peux pas démarrer le partage. Je sais pas pourquoi. Et... Donc. Voilà.
Bon.
Je ne sais pas, je ne sais rien. Je n'ai pas compris qu'est-ce que j'ai fait. So, Iftar Street is a very interesting kind of ritual. Iftar is the Ramadan fast breaking at the sunset, celebrated with a meal normally. You can see the...
Yes, we can.
Okay. The Iftar Street is the fast breaking celebrated with a meal by the Muslims of the neighborhood in San Salvario, is a neighborhood in Turin, in which all other inhabitants of any religion and even non-religious one are invited to participate. The events take place in a street, Via Saluzzo, that you can see in the slide, which is an ideal link between, as you can see, the Omar Mosque here and the church of San Pietro e Paolo. The banquet is organized with the participation not only of the Muslim Association, but also of the retailers and all the inhabitants of the neighborhood who lend a hand and to make the event possible. On this occasion, a very long table is set up in the street in Via Saluzzo from the mosque to the Catholic Church, and it accommodates up to 2,000 people. In this case, religion is not an element of identity affirmation, but an occasion for inclusion of differences, and is considered by the inhabitants as a real common, able to create belonging. The vice president of the San Salvario Islamic Cultural Association is firmly convinced that this is not a Muslim celebration open to all, and is really a celebration of all the neighbors. When I interviewed with him, he asked if he has encountered any difficulty for this kind of celebration, and he said, no, absolutely. I like to quote this his contribution. He said the great participation of the whole neighbors was a surprise for us. We would never have imagined that there would be so many people willing to help us and share this moment with us. We are not the organizers. It's a feast for the whole neighborhood where everyone brings something and everyone is welcome. So, we can take a look at the different places of worship to understand the coexistence of differences. This is a map of neighborhood, and the red stars are the different point of religions. We have some Catholic Church. Here is this is the church of the Iftar Street. In the neighbor, there are two mosques here and here. There are several evangelical Catholic church, a synagogue, and a Valdesian temple. So it's very it's very rich of religions, the neighbor. And we can see a very symbolic picture. We have the representative of the different religions in the quarter in the place where the Iftar Street take place. We have the representative of Israelites, of Valdesian, of Islamic, of Catholic, of course, and also the National Association of Partisans, the Italian National Association of Partisans. So we have religions group and also non-religions participant. It's very interesting to see this kind of participation. What kind of reflection we can take from this case studies, this example? So we can find the different aspects of ritual that we have analyzed in our research of Créer la ville, creating the city. There is an aspect of social inclusion because the people that participate of this banquet are the people of the different status, social class, if we can say, we can use this word, and different religions and different origins also. And we can find also the inclusion to territory. The people who participate at this kind of ritual feel themselves as really inhabitants of San Salvario neighborhood. And it is a very interesting moment of exchange that is not only limited at the moment of the banquet, the celebration, but go on in the everyday life of the neighbor. I would like told to you the very beautiful experience that we can have in this neighbor, but I see that my time is at the end. Yes, fortunately, the voice.
If you want a few more minutes, Fiorenza, go on as you
you
have.
are very kind, but I have
Yeah,
I
perhaps.
need to stop. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. In any case.
Thank you very much, Fiorenza. It was a really interesting and challenging presentation you had now. And right now I'm acting as both chair and discussant, and I leave the chair and do the discussant thing. And well, there are lots of things that I'd like to say about what you told us, because I think that I'll have to prioritize, because otherwise I might be losing myself. But as usual, I try to make the most of the experience of listening to a colleague and a friend. So the first thing that struck me in your speech was the accent on the emotional and symbolic thickness of the idea of the city. And this is something I think we have to stress and stress, because in our way of coping with the world, our way of conceiving the world, we've lost all this in favor of a mechanical turn, or something that seemed to work on its own without any human participation. And by saying human, I mean corporeity and emotions and symbols and the capacity of building rituals and inclusion. So I think that this is exactly what's at the heart of your research. And it reminds me of a beautiful page of Richard Sennett's The Decline of Public Men, where he told us about the importance of belief. And this is exactly what it's at the heart of my reasoning in recent years, because I think that we mistook the idea of role and building and planning in favor of something, exactly as I said, mechanical, and something that's meant to work without any kind of thicker contribution on our part. And it's not working. I think we need to put back passion and emotion and something that goes beyond the rational in the current modern acception. That's to say, in the rational as calculation, as mechanical planning, as causal linearity, and all that stuff. And this brings me to think about two main issues. On the one hand, the contribution of Georg Simmel, which is my favorite and my field of expertise, let's say, that had lots of views about this. And I think that in connection with what you told us at the beginning, we might say that if we adopt his view of the making of reality as a perpetual exchange, Wechselwirkung, all that stuff, the fact that institutions and higher grade institutions are made out of the tissue of human interaction, then we can perfectly understand the importance of smaller cities for what has to do with the understanding of the mega cities in which we live. And here I would also like to quote sociologists and an Italian sociologist and anthropologist who wrote beautiful pages on this, who is Franco Lacegla, who in a book called To Lose Oneself said that, you know, the ancient city was a collection of forests. The ancient city was a patchwork of smaller cities and smaller belonging areas in which everyone was at home, in which everyone had a place to be, and that were mutually connected and had a sense of mutual respect and capacity of reconnaissance and acknowledgement. So another thing that comes from Simmel about this could be his third a priori. That's to say, this idea that at the base of the community, at the base of coexistence, I'd say, there is this strong and deep urge to find your place in the world. And the fact that this is often not the fact, the occasion, what happens, it's not to be seen as a total failure, as it is something that he said was way up in our sense of understanding coexistence. It's something that drives us. It's something that, beg your pardon? No? Okay. I was saying that it's something that has to do with the fact that there should be a mutual work on the parts of the individual and on the part of the structure. That's to say that in this particular case, the city should work to make it possible for everyone to find his or her place inside the space of the city. So what does to find one's place in the city mean? And this is another good question, I'd say, and something that comes directly out of your speech. That's to say that it's not simply finding a physical space where to live, and it's not simply finding something to do, an economic activity that can feed us and let us live, but it has to do with this deep sense of belonging. The deep sense of feeling that the city is not something that you're just using, but it's a place where you live. It's your place. It's the place where you live and the place that you love in a way. So it has to do with passion, and it has to do with symbols and imagination. You often use the term imagining. Let's imagine the way in which we can imagine the rituals and all that stuff. And it's not by chance. I think that we are focusing recently our attention on the imaginary side of society, of urban territory, and identity making and belonging. I think that we, I think that modernity, in a broader way, thought that all this was to be left behind, was something that belonged to another kind of humanity, a primitive kind of humanity. And I think that that was a great misunderstanding. I think that we all still need to imagine, to build and create bonds between us. And I think that rituals are the main instrument in this sense. Rituals that are born spontaneously, more often than not, but that could be and should be better understood so that we could build them on a larger scale. A few years ago, I wrote something about Europe and its lack of emotional stuff and emotional thickness. And this is something that I think perfectly fits within this kind of reasoning. That's to say that you cannot build something that is bound to last and that is bound to require sacrifice and effort on the part of all those who are part of it without taking care of its emotional aspect, taking care of the fact that it can become a source of belief, not in a fundamentalist or specifically religious way, but in what Georg Simmel would have called religiosity, in its capacity of transcend the mere fact of being to become an issue or a source of sense. So I think that a good deal of what you told us has to do with this, has to do with this effort of trying to give back sense to reality, which is something that instead we are losing. Sense cannot be built out of economy alone. Economy is not up to making sense. I'd quote the Talking Heads song in this. And so we have to find other ways. We have to find again, I'd say, other ways of making sense of our coexistence and our living. And this has to do with the, I think, also with this the question that Beck brought our attention on in his last book. That's to say, the idea that was beautifully recalled by Jens, that cities and megacities can become the driver of change, of mutual reconnaissance and acknowledgement. And I think that this should be something on which we have to reason a bit more. We have to debate and confront, because the whole thing, the whole main thing of the multidimensional risks is, in my perspective, something that has to do with others dimension, not simply a specific or specialistic dimension, but all the others dimension that are still there and we have lost sight of. That's to say, the imaginal versant, the emotional versant, the body versant. You know that you told us that body is usually at work within rituals. It's something that you bodily do. And the body is one of the, actual battlegrounds of our time. Everyone's trying to tell us what to do with our bodies, what bodies are to be preferred and what others are to be shamed, and all that stuff has to do with the deep knot of uneasiness that we are experiencing about this. Let me see. I think that for the time being, I'm done. I think there's nothing more to say, not to make it too too complicated. So I thank you for your attention and get back to my chair role and ask if someone has to contribute something to this meeting before giving back the chair to Fiorenza for a reply. Jens, go on.
Yes. Thank you very much for this presentation. Very interesting indeed. And I think you will understand that I'm coming from a risk context, have particular interest in risk issues. Rituals are a key element, since we know from Mary Douglas' work, in what holds communities together. And I liked, it was very impressive, this long table with everyone eating there. But considering that we are increasingly living in a digitized world, I'm wondering whether you have any knowledge or experiences with in big cities, digitized rituals become more and more common, and whether they are different or anything like that. So it's just because I had a PhD student working on the virtual cities and showing how much virtuality and technology become part of the city. What you have presented was very much yeah, old-fashioned embodied anthropology. And I think looking more into the mix, sorry, I'm exaggerating, but I'm looking more into this mix of the digital world and this having a meal there. And so I'm wondering about that. The other point also, Fabio mentioned that about embodiment, emotions, that is obviously a big topic within sociology. There are increasingly more books on that, also in risk sociology. But I was wondering, you haven't mentioned much about philosophical underpinnings. I'm just curious whether you refer to Merleau-Ponty or any other kind of theorists I could hang on with. I recently had somebody who spoke about neo-phenomenology, and so I'm just curious whether there is anything I could turn to what you are reading when you're thinking about embodiment, emotions involved. So yeah, and the other thing what I found interesting, but you haven't spoken about that, is my own experience about moving. And when you are at a place, just being there means you become familiar with the place without any activities or things organized, just being again and again in a similar place. We become attached to it and developing attachment with the good and the bad things, actually. So it's interesting. So I thought whether you have any views about that. Because, yeah, and then I thought, again, when you showed that stuff about rituals in everyday life and how people come together. Yes, that coming together, bridging or going beyond usual boundaries. And I thought obviously about the situation of risk, in face of risk. People are still doing that, or is it a kind of engagement in when everything is nice and wonderful and you're celebrating together? Because we know obviously from disaster studies that there's a lot of support in the face of risk and so on. But there might be conditions where that is not the case and communities close towards others and stick to each other. So I'm just curious from your research experience whether you have any knowledge or experience about that. Okay, I could go on endlessly, but I probably better stop.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for that.
It's a lot of things. Thank you. I will try to, mainly Fiorenza, I will try to address your questions and curiosities. Is there anybody else who'd like to add something, have some kind of curiosity? I'm seeing Isabella. Okay, go on, please.
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you, Fiorenza. Your speech is very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge about space, risk, and rituals. I was thinking about the notion of space. It is like the product of a collective action. Actually, space is a product producing relations and rituals, of course. In the last years, we have seen the focus of our majors in the biggest city in the world, trying to taking the scale of the cities to a different level, just to make it smaller and more manageable, like the idea of the 50-minute city in Paris. It sounds like a paradise when you listen to the mayor of Paris city, because you listen to some speech talking about a very livable and charming city in which you can meet everybody, you can reach your goals, your job, and whatsoever service in 15 minutes on foot. So you don't have to make more risk environment or make more risky situation just to move yourself from one place to another. So what about the rituals? Does it make the society more divided if we will be living in a 15-minute city? Like if I'm living in a marginalized space, will be I close to every kind of experience of the city? Is that the means that modernity is finished with it, or we are just trying to figure out another kind of relation with space and people? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Anyone else? We still have some minutes to listen to questions because we're right and perfectly on time. I'd say we seem Swiss. Yeah, here is Maria Grazia. Thank you very much for contributing. Go on.
Yeah, I also thank you, and thanks to Fiorenza for this very interesting presentation and speech. I was interested because obviously there is a different way, and we see that with risk, but also with the social practices in general, that there are different ways to enact according to social groups, according to gender, according to a lot of these categories. And I was wondering, and mine is just a curiosity, if these patterns also emerge within rituals, if it's possible to disentangle within these collective rituals some features that are related to the specific group each of them belong to, in terms of religion, in terms of culture, in terms of gender, in terms of all these features that we normally as a sociologist look at. So a question. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that I will give the chair back to Fiorenza for a reply. There are lots of things to be said. And so we'll see if anything crops up later. But I don't see her. I lost track of Fiorenza. Ah, here she is. Okay, Fiorenza, you can go on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Fabio, for your presentation. And thank you for the questions. Very interesting. I tried to give the short answer. So for Fabio, to speak about belief and imaginary. Imaginary is a common way that we work together. And I think that it's very important in not only in the rituals, but in the urban life, our lives in the city, to have a narrative, an idea, an imaginary of the city and of our lives, our desire, our conquest in the city. It's important to implement the living together, the inclusion. It's impossible to realize, to implement this condition without the sharing a common idea, a commons ideas, plurals, in an evident way. And this is the occasion to reply at the interest question of Jens. about the old-fashioned kind of ritual that I presented. But your question gave me the excellent occasion to present another part of the research, and is a part on the Grand Genève, Big Geneva, or Big Geneva is an administrative reality that keep together the Geneva, the canton of Geneva, so the small town, and also the small town in France, in La France voisine, is a conurbation, an agglomeration of Geneva and little town that try to have the same kind of administration. And this experiment don't works because the people that live in this Grand Genève, the people that work in this Grand Genève, don't have an idea of the Grand Genève, of Big Geneva, the spatial and incredible city. We have worked on this aspect with another part of project with an cultural association. We have proposed some atelier workshop physically in the different place of the Grand Geneva, with many difficulties during the period of pandemic, of course, even if in Switzerland the lockdown was very, very different, but in any case. And this initiative were completed by with a virtual initiative on a platform, participer.ch, a platform created in the city of Barcelona and sharing in all Europe, in different European cities. And the interest of this part of project that the coexistence and interaction of a physical part of ritualization and visual participation about a question for us very important, the question of the project, and the question was and is what kind of ritual as an habitant or a person who stay in Grand Geneva you desire, you think. And we have only in 2nd October presented not the results, but the interaction with the population that had participated at this initiative. So for reply and answer to the aspect, to the importance of virtual dispositive and possibilities, it's something that can exist with the more traditional and more physical and more old way to make rituals in the city. And it's important for us as it was something that works very, very well. So about the rituals, like moment of in all the people is happy, all the people live in peace, and is beautiful. We going to resolve all the problem of the world. Of course, it's not this is the case. Rituals can be some kind of context to produce inclusion. In our research, there are also, we observe and study rituals that are very exclusive. In the city of Zurich, there is the ritual, the name is Sexy Leute. I hope, Sandro, that I well pronounced the name of ritual in Swiss, French, German, but it's a ritual very exclusive. Only men that are and belong at a kind of profession or origins. We're not so naive about ritual. There are a different kind of ritual and different level of inclusion in the ritual. But in a number of very interesting of cases, they are a way to starting to exchange, to be together in a space that is a place that we have the tâche, on dit en français,
the task.
Yeah, thank you. I have a bit confusion of language in my head in this moment. To live with and in and all together. About the question of Isabella about the city of 15 minutes city. Paris is an example. I'm live in Geneva, and Geneva is normally a city, a 15-minute city. Is very simple to go everywhere in the city. The public transport is almost perfect, and I don't know if as a person is the good person that can give an evaluation on this. But as a researcher, I think that here is, for me, a little bit romantic idea of city. It's very important to have être à l'aise in the neighbor, in the street of the neighbor, and to have the facility, simplicity to live in our neighborhood. But it's not only the perspective of our lives. We are the for using a neologism, maybe we are almost mobilis, and is our not only destiny, but our way of living to moving, to change of place, to change of work, to change of city, to have a multiple center of interest, of affect, of emotion, of everything of a kind of interesting. So I think that the two aspects are important, and the challenge is keep together this opposite condition of our life and our condition, our actual condition, we hope, after the COVID, the pandemic. So about the question of Maria Grazia about inclusion, I think I a little bit forget the center of the question, but when we speak, yes, I remember. When I work, when we think and make research on the inclusion in the ritual, is only a step, a moment, a part. We have another project with my colleague Sandro Catacin. The project is DIFURB, Difference-Oriented Urban Planning, and is a very big project in Switzerland. Is Synergia project, is a project with 3 great universities, in big universities in Switzerland, University of Geneva, École Polytechnique de Lausanne, et École Polytechnique in Zurich. We study all the kind of difference in the city, not only about ritual, but about the different kind of living together, and how the city, the municipality had the idea to be interested on inclusion of all kinds of differences, in the question of gender, in the question of handicap, and of migration, and so on. It is really a global work, or different part of society and city. I don't know if I have answered to your question. But
sorry, if I can add, my idea was that, but you already answered to that also before, when you mentioned these rituals among professionals, men, professionals of one community, and so on. Because I mean, it's interesting because rituals show a pattern of inclusiveness, of togetherness, but at the same time, a pattern of fragmentation,
yes,
extreme fragmentation and differentiation within the city. So that was the central issue, and you answered very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiorenza, for your final effort with your condition.
I really am.
Yeah, we're thankful for your for this, and I'd like to add a few things, couple of things. This is to go back to Zimmel, what we can see in the dynamic of fashion. It's exactly what we'd call a contradictorial phenomenon, if we stick to the vocabulary of the imaginary. That's to say that in everything there is, in every kind of ritual on this part, or in every kind of belonging, there is an inclusive aspect as well as an exclusive one, and they are impossible to divide, to separate. And so we should perhaps reason in terms of a different paradigm, as we were saying. That's to say, we should try and reason in a et way rather than an out way. That's what Edgar Morin called an inclusive paradigm, or that's to say the faculty of balancing different aspects that coexist in a process or in a phenomenon, and try to balance these things without trying to magnify one at the total expense of the others, because it is impossible to do. So we have to keep this in mind when we think of planning to create rituals, because rituals are, in my side at least, more spontaneous, more not unrationally driven, without trying to put a stigma on it, but as something that springs out of behaviors and occasions and places and instances and whatever. And to this end, I'd like to answer one of Jens's curiosities. I'll try to share my screen. Just wait a moment. Okay. And this is one of the books that structured my whole research parcours. That's to say, the work of a socioanthropologist, French socioanthropologist, that constructed a categorization of symbols out of the deep bodily reflexes of the human being. And it's something I think should be way more studied and reflected upon, because it establishes a link that is able to go beyond the Cartesian division between, body and mind or soul or whatever you wish to call it. And so, yes, I'm not so satisfied with what's been said about body and symbols and imagination up to now. This is one of my favorite books. This is another one from an American philosopher, which is about the another aspect of corporeity that we're not taking into consideration very much. That's to say, the fact that understanding and comprehension starts and happens while moving. And this is close in a way to what we were saying about moving as an experience and a major factor in the understanding of space and city. Because in fact, if we reason a bit about it, we see that the famous Cartesian division between body and mind resulted in the fact that understanding and comprehensions seem to be exclusively intellectual processes, while I'm actually convinced that there is much more to this than that. And this is another one that could be taken into consideration, because it's something new. I'll show you the Italian cover, and it's from another socioanthropologist, sui generis, I'd say. There is a walk-in scientist and a walk-in philosopher, and he's trying to establish a new connection between what you experience and what you understand. I hope I've not, I did not, exaggerate in my, well, how can I get out of this?
All fine, Fabio. I think it's just interesting to see what people read and what they're referring to, sometimes implicitly, sometimes explicitly. And there's from Damasio that kind of research about the wrong division between body and mind. There is a Kahneman with that recent book. There's a lot of stuff out there in the risk area as well. So it's just interesting for me to see how, and to see how they are doing it. So yeah, thank you for that.
I'm glad to share. Well, I'd say we are still perfectly on schedule. So if no one wants to add anything, we can say goodbye to each other, go have a bite, and be back at 2 for the first panel, which will be chaired by Jens, if I'm not wrong. Okay, very well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Fiorenza. It's been a real pleasure to listen to you. And thank you again for your physical effort.